Contrary to the approach, Mr Chairman.
I call Jacinda Ardern.
Thank you, Mr Chair. It's a shame actually to interrupt my colleague who I felt was about to make a very good point. I just wanted to, before I start, it's a shame that the Minister is no longer, the Minister responsible for the bill is no longer in the chair, because I did want to reflect on some of the comments she had made, and I wanted to agree with her on one of her points. She said that for initiatives to work, they must be sustained. And I thought that use of the word sustained was something that broadly I would agree with. I guess my concern is that evidence to date, for me, demonstrates that the government's intention is not to invest in initiatives that will be sustained. And I think all of the language around short, sharp shocks is indicative of that, as is, again, the closure of Te Hurihanga. This was an 18-month program. I do want to go back to this. This was an 18-month program. Those boys who were going through that program and those who are still in that program will not be getting that sustained assistance that was planned for them, and nor, I must add, will the next ones. And I think this is something that the member for Hamilton West should acknowledge, that the government is not proposing an exact replica of this program. It is proposing a shortened version of this program. It is proposing a program that will cost significantly less and will not have the acknowledged staff who are some of the most skilled staff in their arena in this country. And that was something that came directly from the independent review of that program. And I want to say again, the cost per offender was less than the cost of locking up one of those individuals for a few years. I would call that more than affordable. I would call it a necessary investment. I do also appreciate the response that the Minister gave around the drug and alcohol programs and for sharing the conversation that she had with those from Odyssey House and the likes. But I still do have a question, given that there are significant waiting lists around residential places in those programs. I do still ask the question of the Minister of how many beds, how many places in these programs will they be nationwide? At the moment they're centred around some of the cities but not much else. I'd like a little more detail on that if I could. The Minister also, as my colleagues have pointed out, read from a police association submission. I think the Honourable Annette King touched on the problems that come with relying solely on the views of the association. But the only other submission that seemed to be broadly in favour of the government's proposals was that of Graham Dingle from the Youth Foundation. I think the significant reason for his favourable submission was, and he acknowledged this at Select Committee, was the fact that he had put in a bid for the Fresh Start tender that had been put out by the Ministry of Social Development. So I would expect for him to give a glowing submission on the program which he hoped to provide. Now, it's very interesting that soon after, during all of this, that actually the Minister asked us to delay the report back on the bill, and Cabinet papers revealed that actually she was asked to downsize the cost of Fresh Start. And surprisingly, or not surprisingly as the case may be, that contract was not awarded to Mr Dingle. In fact, the Fresh Start program is being provided solely by MSD and the Army. So forgive us, members from the other side of the House, if from time to time we revert to the language of the Prime Minister and call it a boot camp, when one of the primary providers of this program is the New Zealand Army. One would default to the position of that being a heavy part of the program. But I do want to acknowledge, and we did acknowledge in our minority report, the confusion around what the government's intention was on this program, which is why we said it. We believe the government had been disingenuous in the way it presented its initiatives. Publicly, it described it as boot camps, but in the face of intense opposition by those working in the sector, the government tried to paint quite a different picture. We acknowledge that. We always have acknowledged that. I do want to come on to the international obligations, because we've already talked about the Labour's SOP around 12 and 13-year-olds. We also have an SOP before the House around shifting the age up to those up to young people up to the age of 18, for a very simple reason. We proposed that under the SIFS number 6 bill, which I believe is still on the order paper. I'd like to hear the government's view on that bill, because we are currently breaking our UNCROC obligations, and my colleague spoke about the fact that the government didn't even acknowledge that when it appeared before the Human Rights Commission in Geneva. And in fact, Mr Chair,
Tim McIntyre.